Welcome to A Well-Designed Business with your host, LuAnn. LuAnn has a lifetime of experience building a multi-million-dollar business with her husband and cousin, and she knows the challenges you face in your interior design business. LuAnn brings you real-life answers to your most pressing problems, as well as practical strategies to explode your interior design business. So, let's get to the business of interior design.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Power Talk Friday, and I'm very happy to tell you I have Stephanie Chung with me. Hi Stephanie, how are you?
Hello LuAnn, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited. I have to tell you, this is hysterical because we met 15 minutes ago and I'm like, whoa, we are on the same page here.
We're besties.
That's the truth. So I'm very excited about this interview, and just before we get into it, let me share with everybody what we're going to talk about and a little bit about your background, Steph. So Stephanie Chung, and Stephanie has a company called Stephanie Chung and Associates, and she offers sales training, executive coaching, and small business mentorship to serve two companies nationwide. And I searched through every which way. Somebody, one of you lovely people out there, asked me just about 2.5, 3 weeks ago if I would take a show and address sales. And honest to God, I've looked through Instagram messages, Facebook messages, and I am so sorry. I don't remember which one of you did, but I heard you, and I didn't need an excuse to talk about sales. So we're going to talk about sales with Stephanie. But here's the thing. Stephanie has a course that's called High Ticket Selling Made Simple, and it's designed to help business owners sell more and make more. Stephanie herself is a former sales executive in the aviation and private jet industry, and she has mastered the art of high ticket selling and has mentored and coached many people, some of the highest paid, most elite sales professionals in the country. She serves business leaders, entrepreneurs, sales professionals, and she uses her proven executive coaching and sales training expertise to get the job done. Stephanie is a contributor on ABC, CBS, NBC. She is the author of Profit Like a Girl, A Woman's Guide to Kicking Butt in Sales and Leadership, and also of Embrace the Suck, How to Grow and Succeed in Business. So I am like beyond tickled, and I'm a little afraid because I'm sure this could be like a 5-hour show if I let it be.
I have a feeling.
It's the truth. So, Steph, here's the thing. I would love to look. We're going to talk about how I feel like in sales, it doesn't matter if we are a salesperson who is like, for our audience, Stephanie, we have interior designers out there that are solos or maybe with one assistant, and maybe for the first time they have an opportunity to quote and bid a project that might be a full bathroom renovation, which could be a $10,000 or $20,000 project, right? But then we also have designers listening that are looking to go from their wheelhouse of doing full kitchens and full bathrooms, and they have that pretty down pat, but maybe they want to move into the luxury high-end design build where their projects now are $250,000, $300,000, $500,000. And in my way of thinking with sales, it doesn't matter if I'm trying to go from selling something from 500 to 1,000 out of my wheelhouse, or from 10,000 to 50, or from 50, because it starts inside, right? Do you agree with that, Stephanie?
Oh my gosh, LuAnn, 100%, right? It's so much about your mindset. That's
right?
Where the battle or the win or the victory is truly between our two ears. So you're 100% right. And I cannot wait to talk about this subject because I'm passionate about it.
I know, it's going to be a little nuts. I'm a little afraid for everybody. So like it starts with, look, I feel like for me, it's knowing yourself, knowing your product, right? Like, you get us started. Let you show us, and that you show us what you know about it.
So there's a couple of things. The first one is you're 100% right. When we think about whether you're selling, it doesn't matter, right? It really doesn't matter about the ticket item amount, right? Or the gig amount. It really all comes down to your version of your own self-worth. That's really what it comes down to. So your financial beliefs play a role in the entire equation, and your financial beliefs, we all have them. And so when you start thinking about, really being able to price your particular project for what it's worth, and this is sometimes where a lot of us who sell, intellectual property, which is exactly what creative designers do. You're not necessarily selling a piece, something people can touch. Sometimes you're selling a concept. It's your idea, your vision, if you will. And so sometimes people struggle with that because they feel like, well, maybe it's not worth $10,000 or $200,000 or what have you. And that has less to do about the project and the concept. It has more to do about yourself and your mindset and your financial beliefs and your self-worth and your sales confidence and your self-confidence. So I always love to start there. And if you're okay with it, let's kind of dig into that portion.
Definitely.
I think will be a great setup for your listeners for some of the other things we're going to talk about. So let's first talk about financial self-worth. When we are all brought up, and all of us have them, right? So what we have to do is make sure in a sales process, in a sales conversation, we never let our own financial beliefs creep into the conversation. Right. So I'll give you an example. If you grew up like I did, right? I was a military brat, so you're not going to find rich military brats, okay?
They're not living in McMansions on base, right?
Exactly. So I grew up around always hearing, turn those lights off, right? Money doesn't grow on trees, or, eat everything on your plate. There's kids starving, whatever.
Wait, did we grow up in the same house?
Exactly. There'd be a different country every night, right? So you were really brought up with hearing about money from a scarcity perspective versus an abundance perspective. So what does that mean? Well, fast forward, now all of a sudden we're grown adults and we're selling, design services and whatnot. And before you know it, those kind of little subconscious pieces of stinking thinking can start to creep in at the most in op time, right?
Right. It's the truth.
Ever come in. So really what we want to do is when we think of our, self-worth, our financial worth, we really want to have a mindset of a couple of things. One, if you're trying to attract A-list customers, right? No one wants the customers that can't afford your service. Mm-hmm. So the customers that you're trying to work with, they want to work with who they deem as the best.
Right.
Which means that we have to see ourselves as the best first. If we can't believe it, nobody else will, or should they? They really shouldn't expect. If we don't see it, why would they see it, right?
Right.
To have the mindset that and how you feel like your best is you know your stuff and you stand behind your product, your service, what have you. So understanding how you view money is really important so that you make sure it never comes into the conversation. So I always tell people, if you're working with a client and, based on how they've kind of laid out what they expect for that particular room, when you've, kind of plotted out what you think based on their needs, what you think this is going to entail, then be okay with, you've already most likely asked about their budget. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't know. But whatever you've created, be prepared to stand behind what it is that you recommend and the price that it's going to cost you versus bringing that price down. A lot of times people will think, oh, well, I'm going to price it and really it should be $10,000, but I just don't think they're going to be ready for it. So I'm going to come in at $6,500 or $8,000. It's like, no, right?
Right.
Let the client make that decision, because the minute you say, I'm going to put it at $6,500 or $7,500 or whatever, then now that's all about you. It's no longer about the buyer in front of you.
Right.
And that's the biggest discipline that any of us can have in sales, is to know that it's not about us. It's always about the buyer in front of us. What do they need? And let me give them that. It doesn't matter how I was brought up or how I see money. And to be honest with you, LuAnn, I struggled with this on the front end when I first got into the private jet community, because I would go into these homes. I mean, oh my God.
Oh, I can imagine the clients for private jets are also not.
I'm looking at the help's house going, that's a bigger house than mine,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
But you do have to come to grips that, it's not about that. It's about, what do you need? And if you're an expert in your space, which if you weren't, they wouldn't be meeting with you in the first place, then, that's your time to really show your expertise. And that comes with having a mindset of, I'm really good at what I do.
So let me ask you a couple questions about that, because interestingly, I did grow up very much the same way. I mean, I can hear my dad, money doesn't grow on trees and exactly that, turn off that light and who left this light on and all that stuff, right? But the thing is, anybody who is a longtime listener of the podcast also knows that at a young age, 10 years old, my aunt and my mother exposed myself and my brother and my cousins to the Silva method, which completely negated all of that crazy talk about scarcity. And so I'm very fortunate because I did not have to relearn my childhood ingrained patterns or voices as an adult. I, very, very, very luckily was exposed to this and had a complete different mindset instilled of abundance and everything's possible and just put your head to the ground and you can make whatever you want happen. And I don't judge in my own life when I do my sales at Window Works. I'm exactly that way. You ask me for a product, I give you the price of that product. If that's too much money, then you go to the bank and get some more. You don't get it, you get something less. It's not my problem. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Exactly.
It's like if you only want to spend $8,000 and the quote's 10, then what room are we taking off of this order? Like I don't know what to tell you, lady, because when I go to the shop, right, and if I want 20 things and I only have money for 10, nobody feels bad and gives me all 20.
That's right.
It's like, whatever. So the thing is, though.
Preach, sister.
So the thing is, and of course, in the moment, I'm very happy to be professional and help you figure out a way to make it fit your budget. But my point is to your point. That is not my job to figure out how what you want you can afford. You know what I'm saying? So, but the thing is that how do you, for all the people that are listening that maybe grew up with these financial patterns and didn't, have that maybe they're like you said, when you were an adult and coming out and selling into the aviation industry, you were like, whoa, I've got these things going on in my head. What is the mechanism for helping somebody cross out of that thinking? Is that like 60 hours of therapy, or is that something we could talk about? I don't know.
Well, depending on how deep it goes, right? But what I would say is you're 100% right, and that is the answer to the question. The very first thing that everyone has to come to grips with is it really is not my concern how much you can afford.
Right.
That's not my concern. And so if you come from that perspective, which is I'm going to listen to what it is, Mr. Buyer, that you need, and then from there, because here's the thing. 87% of all conversations from a sales perspective, people have already done their research, right? They've looked you up online or on Facebook, or they've asked their friends, hey, I'm thinking about, redesigning my house. And, do you know of any good designers? I mean, they've done their research.
Right.
So by the time they actually take the time, because LuAnn, let's think about it. You and I were talking about our day earlier before we went on air. Everybody's busy, right? We're all just grinding it out, So none of us really have time to just chit chat with people. So what I want everyone to always remember is by the time they agree to either take a phone call with you or allow you to come over or meet you for coffee or any of that stuff, when people agree to do that, it's because they've already done a good portion of research already about you, or at least about the service that you provide, or they have a need somewhere. And so that's why they're taking time out of their extremely busy day to sit and listen to hear what it is that maybe you can help them with. So that's the first thing.
Okay. Can I just say something in there? And so would you agree then if I accept the premise that people have a really good idea of you before they actually make the phone call to call you. Okay. I agree. As a consumer, I agree with that premise. And as a person who owns a business and has interactions, I agree with that premise. So what I would say then there is what you're putting out in the world for that consumer to find, does it look at the price point that you want to be swimming in, right?
Oh, you have just gone down a whole different road, and I'm so happy to go there with you.
Okay, so we're not going to divert down there, but we're just going to say, let's just make a little note right here that if you are looking to do $50,000 kitchens, but your website has, $20,000 or $10,000 kitchen pictures on there, then that's why every time you go into a project and it's like, oh, they don't have the money again. Okay, so I'm just going to say that we're not actually, because we do a lot of discussion on the show about branding and about positioning and all of that stuff. So you have way more other things to share with us, but I just want to say right there, if you have ever missed that message going along all these past episodes, brakes on, and, analyze if your presentation to the world, to those 87% people who have already done that research on you, aligns with the sales and the products and the design that you want to do. And if it doesn't, that's, you can just like put this podcast on hold, go do that, and come back to this, tomorrow, right?
I love that. I love that. And you're right. Your digital blueprint must match and that comes down to branding and consistency in your brand and so on and so forth. And so absolutely, your digital footprint has got to be solid. Okay. And here's the thing. It is, when we think of businesses, here are the stats. Every single minute of every single day in this country, a small business closes. So that's per Bloomberg. We lose over 1,500 small businesses every single day. What does that mean? It means you got to have your stuff together. Yes. It means that your digital footprint needs to represent you, your brand, your message, your tonality. All that stuff matters. So I'm shocked when I see, let's say, people may not have a website. All they have is Facebook. And, and then the Facebook business and personal stuff is blended, right? And we all have that crazy uncle that shouldn't be on there, talking about stuff, right? So you just have to be really mindful that if you're running a business, then run the business with excellence. Right. And that means that you have to know some of the basics of how business runs. But marketing and branding is a piece of that. Right. And so absolutely, you're 100% right. That's really where it starts.
So then let's go past that, because let's make an assumption that we have that aligned, and now we're trying to get over our own issues with the money. And so you were going on and explaining to us, when I asked you that, okay, so they don't have the benefit of being raised by my mother and my aunt, and getting over their money nonsense. What are there a couple of things that we can share with people? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So the very first thing is, first, just to recap, people are super busy. If they're going to meet with you, it's because they've already done some research and they feel already that you're going to be worth their time. Okay, so that's the first thing. Right. Second part of it is, now and I'm going to use the word we salespeople, because no matter if you're an entrepreneur, you are first a salesperson, then whatever business you run is secondary, right? So for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to just use we salespeople. That's it. Then when we're having that meeting or that conversation with our prospective buyer, really what they care about, and this is how I want people to always approach the conversation, they do not care about you or the service you provide. They don't care about any of that stuff. Your product, what your degrees are, they don't care. What they care about is, how can your product or service help make my life, my job easier? That's all they care about. Right. And so when we're spending time with them, we have to approach it from that angle. Okay, so that's the second part of the equation. Now, how do you then, because if we weren't raised by your mom and your aunt, how do we then get past the financial belief part? Well, if you do the first two things right, you're already halfway there, because now it's just a matter of knowing how to ask the right questions to really understand what it is that people need. So I always say, don't ask the surface questions that everybody else is asking. Ask the questions that get a little bit deeper and deeper, because many times what's going to separate you from your competition is most of your competition is going to ask the same basic questions based on the industry that they're in. What you want to do is you want to start asking those questions that really dig a little bit deeper, because remember, sometimes the buyer can't articulate exactly what they need, and which is a challenge for us, right? But our job is to actually keep asking the questions until we're all clear on what it is that they need. We need to be clear, because how do we quote it if we don't know for sure? But we need to force it so they become clear, so we can meet the expectation. So that's the first thing, right? Or I guess the third thing. And then once that happens, and I would also say, just get uncomfortable with the uncomfortableness. See, I know when I start asking questions and they go, and there's this pause, and then they say, I've never thought about that. Good. Now I know I'm getting somewhere, right? Now I know I'm going to be different than everybody else. Why? Because I'm making them think differently. This is a partnership I'm trying to form. I'm trying to connect with them on the front end. And so I really want to understand and figure out, am I the best solution for them? And so digging deep and being comfortable with the uncomfortable is really important. And when you kind of hit that nerve, and you'll know it because they'll, pause for a second. Don't feel that pause. A lot of people hate silence. start feeling it, right?
I know.
Don't feel it. Just let that weird, it will feel like an eternity before they speak. But
right. It's the truth. It's the best. I'm going to tell you what, there's 1,000 things as a salesperson you can do. The best thing is to sometimes just be quiet.
Yeah, I say the power of silence. That's the only
it.
time you can actually apply pressure during a sales call is by using the power of silence.
Right.
Right. So if you do that, and you've understood the need, you know that they're meeting with you, so they do have a need. You've gotten them to articulate it, and you now know based on that. Well, let me figure out what it is that would best serve you. A big part of not having to be worried about how you were brought up and how you see financial situations is really just to hear them and get yourself out of the equation. So, and recapping it, here's what I understand. If I was talking to you, LuAnn, you're looking for this, this, and this. Your desire is this, this, and this. Is that correct? Am I missing anything? Based on that, here's what I'd recommend. And then that is whatever you'd recommend. And now they've got to figure out where does it fit within their budget and so on and so forth.
Right. Well, I mean, of course, I 110% agree with everything you're saying there. And to expound a little bit more on the steps and the process of it is one of the things that you said that I love is I love when things are so obvious. So if it's one thing that we understand that they're looking for us, about us, reading about us, finding about us, and that by the time they call us, they feel like they pretty much know us. But I love the way you put it. They already have decided that you are worth their time. See, that's a little spin on the head. And so I feel like the reason that it's important to say that, and I want everybody to hear it, they've decided already that you are worth their time. Because I find that the people that struggle the most with sales struggle with confidence. And so it comes from, like we've discussed, their financial beliefs as an upbringing, but it comes from a lot of different other things in our upbringing too that erode at our confidence. And a lot of times, you can gain confidence by being extremely knowledgeable about what you're doing. And that brings a level of confidence. Okay. So it's almost like you can't just buy confidence. You have to get it in a certain, by certain layers of activities and things that you do in your daily life and over the course of the years of your life. But one of those things that's very tangible and easy to do is to keep being the very best that you can be at what you do. And then that translates to a level of confidence. But the other thing I love is what you said, is to just recognize that they've already decided you're worth at least their time. And so if you can concentrate on that, if you can take that, and even if you are a designer out there that maybe does struggle with this aspect of the business of closing sales and charging what you're worth and putting your projects at the value that they need to be. If you need to put like a sign on your dashboard that says they made this appointment with me because they already decided I'm worth their time, that's very powerful. I never heard anybody put it that way, Stephanie. I like that.
Well, thank you so much. And, I want to elaborate on a point that you just made as well. How you get confidence. You're right. You can't buy it. It doesn't just automatically come on you. And you get it from the school of hard knocks, right?
So, down the road and back again.
Down the road and back. Exactly. So, knowing your stuff, right? Mm-hmm. School's never out for the pro. Like just the fact that people are listening to your podcast, especially your faithful listeners, that already says they're always trying to tweak their game and get better and, learn more from the experts and so on and so forth. So knowing your stuff will help build your confidence. And of course, getting results will help build your confidence. And from there, when you're sitting in front of a prospect or a client or a job that you've just finished or what have you, being confident enough to also then ask who else do they know? Right. I mean, we don't want to always have to go out in the cold market. So, how we're driving businesses, we want to make sure that we are, working with our current customers, loyalty and retention. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, always looking for new business as well. But getting results is really, really huge. Here's a technique that I use a lot that I want to throw out and give it away for, your listeners to copy and use it on their own if they want. It's called the preemptive strike. And it's something that I work with all my VIP clients on, and I really encourage everybody to use this. And I use it every day in my practice. The preemptive strike simply means that we all have been in business long enough to know what objections are going to come thrown at us, right? Mm-hmm. People are going to, your price is too high, or, whatever, right? Let me talk to my wife or my dog, or, the curtains or whatever, right? We all know the objections that we're going to deal with for the most part. And for the most part, it's usually the same 2 or 3 objections that always come up. So when we're talking about financial beliefs and we're talking about knowing your stuff and getting results and so on and so forth, if you know that there is an objection that's going to come your way, and really you need to sound confident when it comes time, especially when it comes time to talk about your price. So you don't want to fumble all over that discussion when people say, okay, great, what's your rates? And then you're like, that's like, that doesn't instill confidence in anybody. So what you'll want to do is what I call the preemptive strike. Basically, what that means is I'm going to bring up any objection, because again, you always know what they are anyways. So you bring them up in advance so you can control the message, okay? So let's say in my case, in my world with executive coaching or sales coaching, I know that I'm one of the more expensive coaches out there. So after I've assessed whether or not I can help this particular client, and we've talked about a couple of options and solutions, they've agreed that it all makes sense. Here's how I'm going to now roll into something that I know was going to throw up an objection. Okay. Is I'm going to do a preemptive strike, and I'm going to say something along the lines of, so LuAnn, now you and I have discussed what it is that you need. I think I've got a pretty good understanding of what exactly you're looking for. I've offered you up a couple of solutions, which you've agreed makes complete sense and would work for you. So now let's talk about next steps, which will include price. Does that make sense? You'd say yes, and I'd say great. Now, before I jump into price, let me just tell you, I'm one of the most expensive coaches in the area, and here's why. See, so I'm going to bring up the objection. Yes. Okay, so that I can control the messaging versus them saying, wow, that's really expensive. And then me going, oh, well,
hum that, right.
So that alone will help with confidence when it comes to the close.
Okay, I like it. Well, and just to go back into well before the close is in the sales process. Okay, so in the sales process, we have just come to the table and recognize that your financial upbringing and beliefs have no place in this process. Just leave them at the front door. I don't care how you do it. You have to, and if you have to go to therapy for 3 months to do it, go to freaking therapy for 3 months and do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if you can just there's such value sometimes in that whole act as if, you know what I mean? So a lot of don't take it as contrary to really knowing your stuff. You can't pretend you know the ins and outs of kitchen design, but you can act as if you're accustomed to selling $50,000 kitchens until you've sold one, you've done it, you've completed it, and you went, huh, I actually did that. And so that's an example of act as if, right? But in the process, okay, so we want to just sort of put aside our programming, then recognize that they already value you and have invited you over. And then in the actual meat and potatoes of the meeting, to me, you tell me where you're at with this, but to me, I guess no one's going to be surprised, but I ask a gabillion questions. So my listeners are like, really? Yeah, okay. But I mean, when I tell you the level of questions that I will go into so that I am so crystal clear, and you said it, because a lot of times the buyer cannot enunciate what it is that their objectives are. So in our industry, people will say to me all the time, oh, I need window treatment, for my son's bedroom. Okay, awesome. Do you need them to be room darkening? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I would like them to be room darkening. Oh, okay. Yeah, just like the ones in my daughter's room. Come look. And there's the sun coming right through them. And I'm like, well, that's not exactly room darkening. Well, it's private. And so the point is that the language screws us up a lot. And our industry is a very technical language for interior designers. There's a lot that's happening, and I'm sure every industry is that way. We're all special, but we are. But anyway, but the thing is that I feel like, in that process, I am asking so many questions in a nice way, in an open way. I'm very, very, very cognizant to listen and not to ask a question and then follow it with the answer to it. I've noticed so many people doing that. I notice so many people that are trying to sell me stuff. They'll ask me a question, I'll say three words, and the next thing you know, they're finishing my sentence. And I'm like, well, no, that's not what I was going to say. You know what I mean? This is what. And so the thing is, for me, in that process, the value there in relation to my high sales close ratio is because a couple of things happen. Number one, I really am going to be one of the very few people that they're going to meet that is really going to understand their needs, as opposed to hearing what they say the first time and maybe they're not even explaining it right. So I have, just the topic of room darkening, I will have at least 5 or 6 follow-up questions on room darkening, and that's one issue. And so then I get very clear on exactly what they need. And then to your point, then I can present the exact thing as a solution for them. And then to my point back and forth again is, if it's too expensive, then I can very easily say, well, this is an alternative, but you'll give up this feature. This is an alternative, but you'll give up that benefit. You stated that as a non-negotiable when we started this process. So, where is it more important to save money or more important to, keep this as a non-negotiable? And what happens is I just feel like it gets to be it almost sells itself by the time it's done. I mean, because
yes.
you right?
It's true. I always tell people the close is the easiest part of the entire process if you've done all the other steps ahead of it, if you've done it correctly. Right. And the close, that was perfect. That was really perfect. And here's why I'm really excited about what you're saying. Couple things. One, just before I forget, whatever the prices that you've recommended, you hit it on the head. If for some reason that can't work within their budget, that's fine. Then you do not just bring the price down. You start taking things away, right? So that is absolutely a must. Like if you do nothing else from this podcast, always remember, if the price has to come down, something has to go off, right?
Exactly.
So that you keep your pricing integrity. But back to your other point, absolutely. Here's one thing I would encourage people to start doing. What you were talking about, you hate when someone asks a question, then they start answering it. We call those suggestions, right? It's a question, but it's kind of a suggestion, and then I'm like filling in the blanks. So we don't want to do that. We want to discipline ourselves to actually start asking questions that we don't know the answer to.
Right. And listening too, because sometimes what I find is if I will just truly listen, they will keep teaching you how to close them. They will keep expressing all of because like to your point, what you have to do, they don't care about you. They want to know how you're going to solve their problem. And if you give them the opportunity to answer questions fully without interrupting them and letting them express, or then just prodding them as they finish speaking about more details or to press them for more clarity, they will teach you exactly what you need to make you the person to solve their problem.
Yes, absolutely. And I love what you said, pressing them for more clarity, because sometimes what will happen is people will ask the question and then the person the person doesn't answer it, or they kind of, they redirect, and then they, at the end of the day, they didn't answer the question. Right. And what a lot of times people will do, salespeople, is they'll leave it. And again, we're all salespeople here. Right. It's important that if you didn't get the answer to your question, you circle back around and you ask it a different way, but you cannot move on and just think, okay, well, I'll just leave that one alone. No, if you need to know that, then you need to circle back. And if that means you have to ask the question 16,000 different ways so that you can get the answer that you need, so that you can actually provide them with something that's going to help make their life or their job easier. That's our job as salespeople, because again, the buyer can't always articulate what they need. They may not even know. And the difference between them and you is the fact that you are the expert.
Right.
They didn't go to school for what you're the expert.
Right.
I don't care if it's a, $200 million home or $1 billion home. It doesn't matter. They don't know your space. You're the expert. That's why they're spending time with you. And with that, they're expecting you to actually ask the questions, challenge their thought process, help them get clarity, so on and so forth. And that's what really effective questioning does.
Yeah. I look, I love it. I love that whole process of it. I love the discovery process of it. I love really feeling fully able to create the solution that they're looking for, because that's the most successful project. If I have done enough, and I have different conversations with people, and a typical thing that could happen is I've done my due diligence on the first appointment and this and that and the other thing, and then something will arise in maybe, we're trying to, you go back, you give the quote, you come back, there's more questions or whatever, and every once in a while something will arise in that second conversation. I'll be like, that's sort of contradictory to the information that I got the first time. And if it's critical, if it's a $15,000, $20,000 window treatment, like, I would need to know now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I will very often say, I'd like to come back. Can we just come back? I want to go over. And they'll be like, well, I just want to give you my credit card and get going. I'll definitely take a credit card, believe me. But like, can I come back? And I've heard myself say, I would rather do 3 appointments on the front end to make sure that I completely understand what you want to have out of this project than 3 appointments after it's delivered to explain how I didn't get what you wanted on this project delivered. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly.
It's like, let's do it all before I create your custom window treatments. Thank you very much.
Well, time is money, right? So I'd rather spend the time on the front end to get it right, so I don't have to deal with it on the back end.
Yes. And it's like, and it's just because and there's times too from the question process that you might discover that you are not the person for the solution for this client.
Yes.
Right? That's the other really great part of a nice question process. And I find that too, every once in a while I have conversations with designers that will relay how they feel like in the initial phone call they've made it very clear on the parameters of what the first consultation can be expected. And of course, Stephanie, our designers are all over the board on this. Some designers do not charge for the initial consultation. Some designers do, and it's $100. Some designers do, and it's $800. Some designers do, and it's $200 and 2 hours, and every idea I can give you, you can execute on your own if I walk out the door, or you can hire me again. So it's really very individual to the designer how they feel they've set their firm up and done it. So we can't blanket the statement, but I feel like I'm asking for your opinion on this, because often I will hear and speak with a designer who feels like, despite the initial conversation with a client over the phone, that once they go and they have that consultation, they have sometimes pushback from the client who says, well, I don't think I should pay for that consultation now because you didn't do what you said you were going to do, or there wasn't enough value there, or you said that you would stay 2 hours and you only, whatever it is. And the thing is, I feel like sometimes they get muck and mired in the nitty gritty of what the client is balking about. And to me, there was an error somewhere in that first conversation. Something wasn't clear in the agreement going in, right? Even though they're standing and telling me, no, I told them over and over again, it was $200 for the first consultation, and I would give them as much information as I possibly could, but there was no guarantee on how much information I could give. And that could all be what happened, but I'm suggesting, and I'm asking you if you agree, that the words were said, but there wasn't understanding gained. Like there was 2 conversations happening, and that to me is where question, make sure I understand, right? Do you see what I'm sort of saying?
Absolutely. And, I think that also goes with the concept of industry jargon, right? What we have to do is, well, one, we have to make sure we're easy to do business with. And part of that is being able to communicate. Sometimes we are so focused because we're so around our industry that we end up speaking our industry terms, right? And so someone who's not in our industry may actually have a misunderstanding about a word that we may use. So I'll give you an example. This is a horrible story, but I'll share it with you because we're family now.
That's right. Clearly.
So I desperately had to have my hair done, and my grays were popping out, and I had a speaking gig to do, and I was like, I got to get, and my hairdresser was, on vacation. And so I needed to go get my color. So there was a hair salon right near where I lived. I'd never gone there before, which was like big mistake number one. So I called and I said, listen, I need to get my hair colored. My grays are coming in, and can I just get a touch up? She says, sure. She says, what color is your hair? She's never seen me before. I said, well, it's kind of like a brownish, like a copper color, right? So she goes, okay. So I get there, and, I'm desperate. I'm like, I got to get this done today, right? So I get in there, and she puts this color on my hair. And as I am sitting there in the sink, it's dry, it's wet. So she's getting ready to, dry it and all that stuff. LuAnn, it was like this hot paint, like, I don't even know, maybe it was red, maybe it was maroon. I don't even know what color it was.
It was whatever color copper meant to her, right?
All I know is my sister-in-law looked at my hair and she goes, whoa.
You're going on stage with that thing?
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's so not me, right? I'm not that fun and edgy. And so I remember just sitting there looking mortified because, here I am, a grown 50-year-old with like this pink maroon, hair. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. And now here's the thing. She said to me, well, you said your color was copper. Now, the fact of the matter is I'm not a beautician.
Right.
I was just using that as
Wasn't she looking at you?
Yeah, exactly. She goes, well, when you first walked in, that was the color. I was like, are you kidding? Like, it is not the color. Okay. But here's my whole point. In her world, if someone says copper and she's talking to another beautician and they all use the same color line, then copper it's very clear, right? I didn't know any of those details. All I know was I was using just my own, conversation based on my limited viewpoint of beauty salon stuff. So with that in mind, I always want to just caution people that when we're talking to people who are not part of the industry, you're better off saying it and reconfirming it different ways to make sure everybody's clear.
Exactly. Right? I mean, that's exactly right. Because in that same situation, that's sort of what I was trying to express by asking 15 questions about what does room darkening mean to you? Because if you walk through the door and I was a beautician and you told me copper, I would think, well, that's not copper hair. But I wouldn't just go, okay, let's give her copper. I'd be like, well, your hair right now is really more cinnamony, caramel. Did you want it to stay that color, or do you want me to go to copper? You know what I mean? Like, and that's the truth. You have to, and I think that's really, to me, when we talk about sales and we start with throwing away our negative financial beliefs if they're there, then we move into a space of confidence, and we move into a space where we recognize our value. We recognize the schooling and the education, whether it's the physical university or the school of hard knocks that you've gone to as an interior designer, that you do know more than the client that you're looking at across the table at, and that they have made a decision to call you, so they see something in you. Okay. And then everything you can learn. If you want to be a kitchen designer, know everything about it. Know about, the different, I don't know about it. I'm not a kitchen designer. Know everything about it. Exactly. Because that helps you ask the great questions that give you and help you deliver a great project. Because like you said, Stephanie, if you can solve their problems, if you can solve the pain points, then you are the rock star. And you can only do that if you really know what they are. And you can only know what they are if you ask enough questions. And then the other thing that you said was the preemptive strike is to be prepared and know your value. That's what I heard in that, is know your value, understand what you're bringing to the table, the culmination of all of these things, so that when an objection comes up, or you can, project, think about it preemptively, like you said, build it right into your conversation. You're not afraid of it. I say all the time with Window Works, we're not the least expensive on the block. I'm not worried about that. I'm going to give you the best service. I told this story. It's funny. I did the keynote at IWCE last March, and I told this story at the IWCE. I don't think I've told it on the podcast before, but if I did, I'm sorry. But what happened was we had a client come into the showroom. And she said to Adriana, she said, I want an appointment. You have LuAnn, somebody named LuAnn there. Yes, I want an appointment to meet with LuAnn in the showroom. Well, that's unusual for us. It's shop at home. I go to your house, right? And Adriana, oh, no, she'll come to your house. Nope, I want her to come to the showroom. Okay, comes to the showroom, whatever. So she comes to the showroom. We're chatting a little bit. After maybe, 10 or 15 minutes, we're this and that, and she's asking me a couple of questions. She literally abruptly says, okay, you know what? I'll make the appointment to come out to your house. You can make the appointment to come out to my house. And I was like, it was funny because question. Then all of a sudden it was like, okay, let's just make an appointment. I was like, so I go, all right, let me get my laptop, and I come back out and I'm like, all right, so, such and such day, blah, blah, blah. And so I just looked at her, and she must've known that I was sort of like, what the heck? What happened? We flipped the switch and we make an appointment. And she just looks at me. She goes, I found out about you from a Facebook group. And she said, and basically I typed in, does anybody know a window treatment place that I could go to? I've only moved to the area in the last couple of months. And she said there was probably 20 that came up in 10 minutes. And literally 18 of them said to go to Window Works. And so she said, but, so I've noticed since I've moved to this area, because we live in a high demographic area, she said, I've noticed when I moved to this area that sometimes when people come to my house, they, sort of make assumptions based on the size of my house. And I like to get to know people before they get to know the size of my house. And I was like, I wanted to say to her, I've been going in houses the size of your house since you were on this planet. They don't impress me anymore. Like, don't worry about that, right? But I was just like, oh, okay, I totally understand. And so she said, so I feel comfortable with you now, and I feel like sort of, it's going to be good. So I'm happy to make the appointment. And I said, okay, good. And so she said, and she goes, though they did say a couple. Oh, I know what I said to her. I said, what sorts of things, that you had a lot of people respond. She said, yeah, it was really great. I'm like, oh, that's a great group, and blah, blah, blah. And she said, yeah, everybody had a lot of really good things to say to you and about you. And I was like, I'm so happy about that. It makes me feel so proud. Thank you. And she said, and she just turned and looked at me and she said, but there were a few people that said other stuff. And I just looked at her. I was like what? And she said, well, almost everybody was positive, but the people that weren't positive, they basically said, you're expensive. And I just looked at her and I said, they did. And she said, yeah. And I said, well, the people that were positive, what kinds of things did they say about Window Works? And she looked at me. I said, no, like specifically, what kinds of things did they say? And she said, oh, well, they said that, your installation crew is very well seasoned, that you particularly, they kept saying, call LuAnn. She really knows what she's doing. They said that you're family owned and that you've been in the area for something like 25 or 30 years, that you have a lot of installers and that the installers are always on time and that you always make phone calls when you're going to be late, or you're going to, lots of communication, all this other stuff. And she's going on, and I'm just looking at her, and this is don't stop this lady from talking, right? And when she was all done, I just looked at her. I said, so did you want to exchange all of that for a lower price somewhere else?
Good for you. Boom.
Yeah. Slam dunk, right? And the thing was, and the reason I share that story is because it's, to me, the other side of the coin on the preemptive strike. So you can do the preemptive strike, and I thought that was very effective, where you say you're closing them all along. And then, Stephanie, you said, I just want to let you know that I happen to be one of the more expensive coaches, and however, these are the things I bring to the table. So it's the other side of that. When somebody looks at you and they say, I heard you were expensive, or I heard this, or I heard that, already know your worth. Already know what you bring to the table. Don't stand there and go, well, and because the reality is, I'm going to tell you what, Stephanie, the reality is we are not more expensive than everybody else that does the same services that I do. You see, and that's very different. You want to compare me to the blind shop that's half blind shop and paint shop? Well, yeah. But, that's not what I am. You want to compare me to a full service concierge window treatment service. I'm actually not the most expensive. You know what I mean? And so I just wanted to share that because it's the other side of what you were teaching us with the preemptive. Do you agree it's the other side of that? Two different ways to handle that?
I love that. And you know what? I actually would even add to that. And it was something that you said earlier, here that I want to make sure that we touch on, which is to actually on the very front end, when you're setting up, on the front end of the conversation, you're setting up the close. And that's why. So here's one of the things, preemptive strike is a piece of it. But another piece of it, LuAnn, is just, you said it, we're not for everybody. Right. So the minute we actually say that to people, that could be one of the first things you start to say, because now all of a sudden people take their defenses down. Mm-hmm. And now they tap into a whole different part of their brain to start listening. That's where trust is built, right? Part of the prefrontal cortex. And so if we ask certain questions or we make certain comments, what we're doing is I do a whole teaching on neuroscience of selling, but it really does make the person in front of you start to release and go, oh, okay. So one of the techniques that I use, and I would encourage your listeners to do, and I'm positive you do it as well because you mentioned it, is I always say, well, there's this one, set the agenda first so that everybody knows what to expect, right? Mm-hmm. So you can say, thanks for meeting with me, LuAnn. A couple of things. Let me tell you how I normally conduct this consultation. And then you say what it is that you do. And then one of the things that you want to put in there, and I say this all the time in my clients or my prospects, is to say, listen, let me just first say, I'm not a coach for everyone. Right. Now, the minute I say that, you're going to automatically be like, oh, okay. So right. So because now you don't feel like I'm going to, try to sell you or close you on something. Right. So then what I would say is I'm not a coach for everyone. So my job today is to listen to what you need. And then once I have a really good understanding about what you need, if I can help you, we'll talk about next steps. If I don't believe that I'm the best coach for you, then I'm going to recommend something else or someone else. Would that be all right?
I love it.
Right now,
I love it.
It changes everything.
It does.
And yeah, so we don't have to be all things to all people. You're better off niching yourself out, and that way you're working in your sweet spot. You're working with your ideal kind of clients, people that bring you energy versus suck the life out of you, right? And then, of course, your price then lines up to all of that. They've had a great experience. You've had a great experience. Everybody wins. There's so much that happens on the front end. So I agree 100% with you. Sometimes the best product for them is really not your product or service. It's someone else's.
It's so true. And you know what? That it all comes, the whole culmination of everything, all the different things along the way to get you to that place. Because if you have done all the other hard work of putting aside your bad programming, you have done the hard work of becoming the expert that in every aspect of what you're doing, and you wear that and you own that, and that instills confidence in you. And then you've asked all your questions so that you truly understand what is the best way you can serve that client and what's going to be the best project for them, what they really need. And then you really do enunciate your value and what you can bring to the table. If it's not for them, it just doesn't matter now. You're just, it's not a strike against you. It's not oh my God, I didn't get the project. It's like, whatever, move on. She's not mine. I'm not hers. I'll go get the next one. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean,
yes.
So I think that it's very, like you said, and I want to sort of wrap it up with this. What you said is that every single business owner is a salesperson. And so I think a lot of times sales and sales training, it gets it can get a bad rap, like, car salesman techniques, and all this crap. And the truth of the matter is the best salespeople are people that you don't feel like are selling you, because you know what? I don't feel like I'm ever selling anybody. I always feel like I'm getting to what is their problem so I can solve it. And so when you really come at it that way, and of course you have to have this arsenal of other things in your back pocket. You have to have your knowledge, your expertise, your confidence. But if you ultimately do think of sales in that way, then it's not a dirty word, it's not a bad word, and you should actively go out and get coaching or get help or read books or listen to podcasts that focus on it more often, because it is critical to the life of your business. You are selling every single day.
Absolutely. I love that. And you're right. With no sales, you have no business, period. So you can't put your head in the sand and say, I'm just not good at it. I just don't like it. Well, you got to figure it out. You got to get some kind of help to get over that, because if you want a long-standing profitable business, you will have to sell.
Right. And the reality is that there could be a designer out there listening who really is just like, right, you're not convincing me. I'm never going to want to sell. I don't like selling it. You know, I just wish it would just come easier or whatever. And the fact is, what I would say in that case is maybe you are really better off and would be so much more fulfilled working for another firm. You know what I mean? Because the rainmaker is generally the principal. So if you don't like being a rainmaker, if you love designing and you're a solo and you're struggling to fill the pipeline, and you know that it's not any of the other things that we talk about, it's not your branding, it's not your price points, it's not any of that. It really is because you just really don't want to get out of your box and sell, which is not a bad thing. I mean, we can't all be the same. There's no point in it. There's no fun in it. But if that's really what's stopping you from being successful, but the rest of it is joyful, then go stand in the space of being happy to work for somebody else and let them rainmake and design all day, right, Steph?
Yes, absolutely. There's no shame in that.
Right.
There really isn't. Not everybody, needs to run a business, right? So yeah, I completely agree. And this is, kind of a witness test, right? If you used to work somewhere else and you made more money, plus you had health insurance, right? and you got able to work, have the weekends off or whatever, then now all of a sudden you're running your own business, you're barely making any money, you're, stressed out, you can't sleep, all of that because you don't have a pipeline or you don't have business coming in, then you're 100% right. Nobody starts a business to make less money than they did when they worked someplace else, right? Or work twice as long. So there's no shame in actually, it's all about what's going to get you fulfilled. Yes. And if that means working for someone else where you can, still use your gifts and talents, and make more money and, have all those things kind of taken off your plate, by all means do that. There's no shame in that whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, because I just really feel like that is such a strong message that if you are not going to pony up and really recognize that is one of the biggest roles as the principal of a firm is to be the rainmaker. And if it's so against your grain, then you got to examine that. You just got to, at the very least, you got to sit down with yourself and say, okay, let me get real here for a minute. And the thing is, it might be that you still prefer to be self-employed, but then maybe you figure out a way that maybe it doesn't need to be your primary income. Maybe it is something that you do joyfully. You do 4 projects a year and they make you whatever they make you, but you have a primary income from somewhere else. It's just, all we're saying is that you can't ignore it.
All we're saying is you can't avoid this thing called sales.
That's it. You just can't. And I just love it so much. I love the process of it so much, but it's not anything like that snarky car salesman, stereotype. To me, it's the joyful process of really learning what it is that's going to, for you at the end of it, to look and say, man alive, that was great. I'm so glad you did that for me, and I can't wait to tell everybody about WindowWorks. You know what I mean? So
yes, exactly. It's right. And I actually like what you said, because maybe you find another revenue stream coming in, and that doesn't, that fits, that you still get money coming in, but it's not, you've got to go out there and do what you're required to do as a salesperson. So maybe you do more behind the scenes, webinars or something like that. Who knows? But, find another revenue stream as well. But I 100% agree with you. I really do. But you know what I would also say, though, LuAnn? There is enough training out there and books and tapes and workshops and all kind of stuff there. If you want to become a better salesperson, there's really no excuse not to.
Right. If you're motivated to be. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no shortage of information. It's one thing if you say, I want to become a coder. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, then you got to investigate where exactly you go for that. But sales, if you Google it, you've got literally gazillions of places that you can learn how to do it and just be more effective.
Exactly. And that's a great place for me to ask you to share with everybody your website and the resources and services that you offer, because I know that you do have a lot of resources available to all of us. Tell us about that. Yes.
Sure. So probably one of the easiest ways to catch me is StephanieChung.com. And if you go to StephanieChung.com, I have a lot of free resources. We have videos on there. I also have a YouTube channel that, you can just get really quick tips about sales, different techniques, and some fun stuff. For all the women listeners that you have, you can download my book for completely free for your listeners. You can go to ProfitLikeAGirl.com. And the book is actually called Profit Like a Girl, A Woman's Guide to Kicking Butt in Sales and Leadership.
I love it.
But they can just go on to ProfitLikeAGirl.com and download it for free. And I really just created that book because at the end of the day, women and money, there's so much that we have to offer. And so I highly recommend people download that.
Oh,
and then the last thing I would just say is, regardless of all of that, school's never out for the pro, right? So, definitely check out the website, go to Profit Like a Girl, sign up for something, because what happens is when I do things for small business owners, I don't do workshops and masterminds very often. Usually do it a couple times a year. And so when I do it, though, I always will first let my tribe be the first ones in, and then have additional space, then we'll open it up to the public. So I actually have done courses before just specifically for interior designers. High Ticket Selling Made Simple is one of them, where we talk about, if you are selling, and high ticket doesn't mean you're selling the most expensive thing. It just means you're not the cheapest in your space.
Right.
And so teaching the basics of how to handle objections and close deals and ask for the sale and all that in a very non-threatening, non-salesy kind of way. It's truly designed for designers that really just want to keep the deal moving, satisfy the customer, serve the customer, but not come off like that used car salesman person. So anyway.
I love it. Thank you so much. I wouldn't be surprised if you get lots of people over to your website taking advantage, especially of the free download on the Profit Like a Girl. Say it again, Profit.
Yep, profitlikeagirl.com.
I love it. That's awesome. So I'm going to have to take a look at that. But I thank you so much for coming on the show. I just think that your information is so spot on, and I just love talking about it all day long. So, but I do appreciate your time, Stephanie, and I am so certain that my listeners are going to get a great advantage from like you said, a lot of the free resources that you have on your website. So thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, LuAnn.
Thank you for joining me again today for another episode of A Well-Designed Business. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks in Livingston, New Jersey, your trade resource for custom window treatments and awnings. Learn more about WindowWorks at www.windowworks-nj.com. All of our music is original music by Room 2 Productions. Please contact us if you want to learn more about original music for your business or your events.